Yo, what up, y'all? Welcome back to MMA Unrivaled. Fresh off of UFC, what was it, Abu Dhabi, Whittaker versus RDR. It was a pretty good card. I had said in the last video that on paper it was pretty stacked. It was good. Um, we had Shara Bullet, who was my lock of the week last week, and I had picked him by knockout, but man, that was a great fight. It was good. He got the win, got the decision, and it was just a bloody great, great fight. So that was good. That whole card though was like all dogs won that. So I don't know anybody whose parlays won, you know, but yeah, that was a crazy card. It was good. Shout out to Char Bullet. That was great. Tabitha Ricci got the finish. I got that one completely wrong. Um, yeah, and then Piotr Jan versus Marcus McGee, great fight. Jan was just on point like I thought he would be. He looked great. But shout out to Marcus McGee, man. He held his own for a while. I think you know, he's got some great fights ahead of him. He's got a lot to look forward to. He looked great. Just Jan was just on point, man. So that was good. And then the main event, Robert Whittaker, RDR, super, super close fight. I personally had it leaning towards Whittaker and like by split decision. Like I barely. It was so close. But that knockdown really was just, I don't know how the hell RDR survived that. That hit was so hard, man. That Whittaker is just fucking great, man. So it was a good fight. Shout out to RDR. I don't know what's next for him. I wouldn't give him the title shot right now. I would, Paulo Costa was talking his shit on Twitter. So I think that would be a good fight, because Paulo Costa was calling out Hamza, and, I get it. There's bad blood between them. It's more of a personal thing. But, you're not going to you're not gonna win one out of your last what is he 1 in 5 recently, something like that, and then finally get a win and then call out a title contender, and then I mean who knows if Hamza ends up winning the champ, like you can't really. So I think give him RDR. That'd be a good matchup. I'd watch that. It'd be an interesting fight, especially if we get the version of Paulo Costa we got in his last fight. So yeah, it was a great card. It was pretty fun. Like I said last time, I liked the early start time. But this week we have a card that's pretty good. It's nothing crazy. But there are some interesting fights on here. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's break down UFC Fight Night. Tatsuro Taira versus Hyun-Sung Park. First fight of the night, we got Piera Rodriguez versus Ketlin Souza. Piera Rodriguez looked good in her last fight. She had a good fight against Josephine Knudsen. She took her down. She controlled her for a lot of the fight. And, this fight she's going up against Ketlin Souza, who she's had some good wins recently. She is coming off a split decision loss to Angela Hill, where she looks pretty good, but, she does get taken down a lot. She doesn't look the best when she does get to the ground, I would say. I fully expect Rodriguez to wrestle, and just put the pressure on Souza. But I'm not fully counting Souza out on this one, because if she can stuff the takedowns and keep it on the feet, I feel like she would have a good chance there. But, I would think Rodriguez would want to get the fight to the ground as soon as possible, where she has that advantage and come out with a win. And that's what I think is going to happen, man. I'm going to take Piera Rodriguez on this one by decision. She's sitting at a minus 185 right now. Next up, we got Rafael Estevam versus Felipe Bunez. Rafael Estevam is a great fighter. He's currently undefeated and is a heavy favorite right now, sitting at a minus 520. he's a fighter who he knows his strength. His biggest strength is grappling, and he actually plays to his strengths by using it. I had said, I believe it was last week, about, you get these wrestlers and grapplers who that's their specialty, but then they kind of fall in love with their striking and want to just strike more, and it doesn't always work. Not him. He knows this is my strength, and I'm going to do what got me here. I think, he gets his takedowns, and I think he looks to get there right away. And overall, his wrestling is just great. His grappling is great. He has good ground control, good ground and pound, and I expect him to win this fight pretty easily, I'd say. He's the heavy favorite. I don't think Bunez can keep up with the pace that Estevam is going to put on him, honestly. I'll take Rafael Estevam by submission. Next up, we got Austin Bashi versus John Yanis. This one, Austin Bashi, he looked great on the Contender Series. Really good, but then he lost his UFC debut against Christian Rodriguez back in January, who is a great fighter. That's not a terrible loss. He lost to him by decision. It was his first loss too, which I always think is great. You get that first loss, you learn from it, you grow. I think it's good, especially for a younger guy. I think this is a fight where he can really bounce back and get back on track. Not to say John Yanis is gonna be an easy fight for him or anything, because John Yanis has some good striking. He has some power, but from what I've seen in some of his fights, when it goes to the ground, he does seem to struggle a bit. And Bashi, he has great wrestling, great grappling. He has a good gas tank. He can put the pressure. He's durable. I just think he's going to put that pressure on Giannis and get the win here. Plain simple, I'll take Austin Bashi by submission too. He's sitting at a minus 280 right now. Next up, we got Nick Klein versus Andre Puliev. Nick Klein, he has some decent grappling, but he does seem to have some trouble on his back. And Puliev is a bigger guy. If he gets on top, he can control the fight. But I do think that Klein will be the more active fighter. I think he's going to throw more. He possibly shoot for more takedowns. I do see him possibly having some better hands, but I'm not 100% confident in either guy. This one to me, even though, there is a favorite here with Puliev, it's sort of a pick'em for me. I may be wrong on that, but I am liking the dog on this one. I will take Nick Klein by decision, sitting at a plus 130. Like I said, I just think his striking is going to be what wins him this fight. So, give me Nick Klein by decision on this one. Let's get the dog in there. Next up, we got Rodolfo Vieira versus Tresean Gore. Rodolfo Vieira being a minus 218 against Tresean Gore seems a bit off to me, only because I would think Rodolfo would only be favored this much if his opponent had no ground game. And now, Tresean Gore, he does have a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he has great takedown defense. So if Rodolfo can't get Tresean down the way he couldn't get Chris Curtis down, then, I could see the fight going bad for him. And granted, the Chris Curtis fight was a long time ago, it was a few years ago, but, he also struggled to take down Andre Petrosky. And, so I do see this fight coming down to striking for the most part, and I do think Gore can keep it on the feet, but I don't feel confident to pick Tresean Gore. Just because, his output isn't as significant. It's like he takes more hits than he gives out, and maybe he does have some power. We haven't really seen too much of it, but, I don't think Rodolfo, he has a great chin. I don't think he's ever been knocked out. So I think this will be a competitive fight. It's most likely going to stay on the feet, like I said, and I expect Rodolfo to just be the more aggressive fighter. I expect him to throw more shots, land more shots, and coming out with the victory, possibly decision. Uh, yeah, I'll take Rodolfo Vieira by decision. He's currently a minus 218. Next up, we got Rinya Nakamura versus Nathan Fletcher. Nakamura is a wrestler who chose not to wrestle much in his last fight. He has the advantage in this fight if he does decide to wrestle. And I guess that's why he's such a big favorite going into this fight. He is a minus 425. Even though Fletcher did have a close fight against Calvin Laughran, where a lot of people thought that Nathan actually won that fight. And, I can see it being more competitive if Nakamura doesn't take it to the ground. And, the way he's been fighting, I'm not sure if he will. But I still feel like if it does come down to that striking, that he does still have the better striking. So I'll take Nakamura on this one. I think, the line being minus 425, it could change later on in the week. It could get closer. But yeah, I'll take him on this one. Give me Nakamura by decision. Next up, we got Danny Silva versus Kevin Vallejos. Vallejos is a great fighter. He went the distance with Gene Silva, which is, great. He's very durable. The striking is there. The volume punches are there. The power is there. And he's going against Danny Silva, who he can get some takedowns. He'll stand and bang and get into them exchanges and just, throw at high volume, which is what he did in his Contender Series fight. But if you get hit by Vallejos, he has power, man. He can shut your lights out. And, Silva he has a chin, but I can see this one going to Vallejos, man. I'll take Kevin Vallejos on this one by KO/TKO. It's just, like I said, Danny Silva has a chin. He's pretty strong, he's pretty durable, so maybe decision, but I see Kevin Vallejos coming out with the win. He is currently minus 395. Next up, we got Neil Magny versus Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos. No disrespect to either man here, but they both have a lot of miles on them. Both are older fighters. Eliseo is coming off a KO loss, but Neil Magny, he honestly hasn't looked too great in his last few fights, even though he has fought some talented, super tough fighters. I think his age is catching up to him, unfortunately, with all due respect. But, maybe he can grapple and control Zaleski here, maybe control him against the cage. But if Zaleski can touch Neil's chin, I think he's going down, and even if it does go to the ground, I still would give the advantage to Zaleski on this one. It's just overall, I think he is the better fighter. So yeah, I'll take Eliseo Zaleski by KO. He is currently a minus 198. Next up, we got Carol Rosa versus Nora Cornell. This is going to be a competitive fight. I really like the dog here. Nora Cornell, she's a hard hitter. She walks forward. She throws them stiff punches. She has some power, and she can really put the pressure on these women. Carol Rosa, she also will throw down, but I see her more as trying to land more shots without really trying to finish the fight. Sort of like point fighting, whereas Cornell's going out there and she's swinging for the fences trying to take your head off. I could see this really going to the distance. I could see this being a split decision, but I really like Nora Cornell by KO on this one. So give me the dog on this one. Nora Cornell plus 154. Next up, we got Alves Brenner versus Esteban Ribovics. Alves Brenner has okay striking. He has some good grappling, but he hasn't really used it much in the UFC. I think if he wants to win, he needs to take it there. But I see this fight staying on the feet, and in that case, I give Ribovics the advantage. His striking he's really high volume and just really precise with his strikes, and Brenner's very hittable. So with all that being said, I will take Esteban Ribovics on this one by KO in the second, who is currently sitting at a minus 270. Next up, we got the co-main event, Matos Rebecki versus Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan has been looking really good lately. You know, he has 2 wins in a row, both by guillotine, and I believe in both of those fights, he was the underdog. You know, he looked good against Jordan Vucenic, but in the fight against Bolaji, you know, he was getting beat for a majority of that fight before he caught that guillotine. You know, now he's going up against Rebecki, who is a really good fighter. You know, he's really well-rounded. He can grapple, he can wrestle, he can strike, and he can strike hard. You know, I would give him the advantage on the feet, and I don't think Duncan's chin can really hold up against Rebecki. You know, I like Matos Rebecki on this one. I think he gets the KO over Chris Duncan. I'd say in the second round. So yeah, give me Matos Rebecki minus 205. And finally, we have the main event of the night, Tatsuro Taira versus Hyun-Sung Park. This is a main event that got put together sort of last minute. You know, after Amir Albazi had to back out due to not being medically cleared to fight. You know, and Hyun-Sung Park was supposed to fight against Steven Ursig next weekend. And I was looking forward to that fight. I thought that was a great matchup. But now he's taking on Tatsuro Taira, and this is a really big step up in competition for Park. You know, I think the fight is going to go to the ground pretty early, and I think Taira has the better grappling. You know, he's super slick on the ground, and if it goes to the later rounds, you know, Tatsuro's, I'd say he has the advantage because he's been training this whole time for a 5-round fight, whereas you know, Park was in camp for a 3-round fight. So, you know, he could potentially gas out, you know, if it goes into those later rounds. And if it does, I think Tatsuro Taira has the advantage, like I said. And I could see him winning by submission, I'd say in the 4th round. Yeah, I would take Tatsuro Taira minus 345. And that is it. That is the full card for UFC Fight Night, Tatsuro Taira versus Hyun-Sung Park. You know, this is, like I said, this isn't a super crazy card, but it's pretty fun. There's some great fights here. I don't really have a lock of the week, though. You know, I was really thinking about it. I guess you could say Tatsuro Taira is my lock of the week. He is a pretty big favorite, though, minus 345. But yeah, I mean, we got this one. We got another one next week, and then we have the next big pay-per-view. So, you know, we just got a couple weeks, and then we have that one to break down, which is going to be a fun one. You know, DDP versus Hamza. But, yeah, I mean, this is a great one. I enjoy these fight nights. It's free. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching. Come back next week for the next one. I'll see you then. Later.